up, everyone? Jason Gilbo here at JGilbo11, taking a look at FanDuel wide receivers for Week 11. This is just an Elix analysis here. Week 11, FanDuel wide receivers. Big Italy 42. I'm breaking it down for him. He is away today, had a baby. So if you haven't already, go ahead and congratulate him. If you've heard me 3 times say this already throughout the pods, do it 3 times. So cash game wide receivers this week. Odell Beckham, he's looking at $9K against the Bears. They rank 21st against opposing wide receiver ones. Been very solid home numbers for Odell Beckham, coming off a couple solid weeks in a row. $9K, certainly reasonable to kind of pay up for wide receiver options this week on FanDuel if you're going a different route, because of guys like LeGarrette Blount, Martellus Bennett. You toss in the kickers and defenses, you got a relatively decent return left over. So Odell Beckham, solid option this week. Overall, Chicago's been okay against the pass. In terms of a points per dollar return, we're looking at a pretty solid one, nearly a 15 projection for him. Obviously, we know the upside is very high. So he's looking at a pretty good floor this week as well. Beckham, I do like AJ Green, who I do talk about on the AJ Green on the DraftKings podcast. He's a solid option for, I believe, just a little bit cheaper. Jordy Nelson, he talks about as his second one, 7,800, so a little bit of a discount here. Jordy Nelson's been on a solid stretcher the last few weeks. Redskins ranked 20th against wide receiver ones. If he's going to see some Josh Norman at times, sure, they'll probably move him away at times. So, we look at this Green Bay Packers offense, and it hasn't certainly been efficient, but in terms of fantasy production, it's been there. And I think Jordy Nelson, 7,800 is a reasonable target this week. Decent team total, Sunday Night Football. I'm expecting a lot of back and forth action in that game. So I think Jordy Nelson, 7,800, I'm in agreement that he's a pretty safe option this week. Targets have been there. Red zone looks have been there. He's been a solid guy inside the red zone in terms of touchdowns this year. I do like Nelson quite a bit. GPP wideouts, he's looking at Allen Robinson, who's on the rise in price again. This is a guy who dropped off the table. A lot of it had to do with the play of Blake Bortles. 7,300 on the road against the Lions. Obviously, this is a matchup where, we've seen the Lions struggle against wide receiver ones, ranking 22nd. They're dead last against the pass. Over the last 3 weeks, 40 targets have gone towards Robinson. We know the double-digit targets are going to be there. And we look at Bortles, 7 touchdowns in the last 3 games. It's been okay. I think in terms of a cash game play, I don't mind it. I think he's borderline for me, and it seems like he's borderline for Justin as well. So not a bad option. Volume certainly in the ranks of one of the higher receivers that you can count on. So I do like Robinson quite a bit in all formats this week. GPPs, I think, is where you're probably going to see him the most, because Jags are not a trustworthy team, but this matchup really is juicy. So I do like Robinson, safe option this week in terms of volume. But, there's always that potential for a down week where he catches just 4 of his 15 targets because Bortles is absolutely awful. Des Bryant, 7,400. Possibly that Jimmy Smith may sit out this week, possibly not. I still don't care, to be honest. Baltimore struggles against wide receiver ones. They've allowed some monster upside games. And this is usually a spot where Justin does look to target, and he's been right most of the time. So home matchup here against the Ravens, 2016 total. Despite Baltimore's defense being very solid this year, Vegas is not expecting a drop-off in production. Given the fact that Baltimore is a good run defense, we could see them throw a little bit more, which would be nice, obviously, for Des production. We've seen 2 very solid games back-to-back for Des Bryant. Obviously the game against Pittsburgh. So I do think that type of potential is here. I think we're seeing finally a connection where Bryant's going to start to get the ball in a more consistent way. There's always potential here for Ezekiel to still break out. There's always potential here for, just a 7 catch for 80-yard game, which is okay at the price, but it's not something you want in GPPs. But we're also seeing the possibility of 100 yards in a score, as we've seen over the last 2 weeks. So I do like Bryant in GPPs. You can certainly fire away there. Value wideouts this week, 6K for Rashard Matthews. Obviously, you look at 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Titans offense is rolling right now. They're scoring nearly 40 points per game over the last 3 and going into the Colts. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. Fantasy Outsiders ranks 30th against the pass for Indy, 25th against wide receiver ones. Pretty good discount. I think in the same game, you obviously have Dante Moncrief at 6,500. If you're going with a little game stack, this is not an expensive one to do it with. I mean, obviously Hilton's up there, DeMarco Murray's up there, the quarterbacks are right around 8K, but Rashard Matthews 6K, Delaney Walker 62, Dante Moncrief 65. These are not bad stacking targets with them. Kendall Wright's 4,700 if you want to take a deep GPP shot. So I certainly like this game to target and fire away with, and Rashard Matthews is definitely one of them. Last one here, Tyreek Hill. Obviously, if Jeremy Maclin sits, which he did not go in practice today as of Friday, he would be a solid option. 13 targets, caught 10 of them in that game against Carolina. In terms of production, I think you can see something similar this week. 13 targets is a lot. I can't say that I'm going to expect that again. I think 7 to 8 is probably maybe a more reliable option. It's a very small sample size for Hill. This is not an offense that looks to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. So I think there is a little bit of risk here. Justin talks about reserving him more for a little bit of GPPs. If Maclin goes, he likes him in cash. If Maclin's out, I differ a little bit. I think he's a Tyreek Hill. This is just a GPP shot across the board. But this is Justin's article. He likes him in cash. If he sits 5,400, really cheap price tags, obviously that would relieve a lot of salary. You can pay up for 2 expensive backs. You can use Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham, AJ Green, a similar lineup. You can go and do a lot of different things. So you would definitely open up some value. If you want to check this article out, FanDuel wide receiver analysis for Week 11, be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. You want to see more wide receivers, check out our cheat sheet as well. And be sure to say congratulations to Justin. Big week here. So it's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel wide receiver analysis for Week 11. Head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. Check out our great tools and content.